Hey guys, back again. My lovely sister Ashley asked me to do a video on propagation. So, excuse the cat. Y'all know she crazy, right? So she asked me to do a video on propagation. So that propagation, if you guys don't know, is where you take a piece of a mature plant and you make another plant with that mature plant. And it's pretty easy, but it can be frustrating. And there are multiple ways to do it. I'm not going to go over everything in super detail, but I do want to just give you guys a general synopsis, like a beginner's version of propagation. If you want to get a little more into it, I'll probably be doing a little more of a series on that later. But I want to keep everything pretty basic because my channel is geared towards beginners and I love to get new people in the hobby. So we'll do that a little later, but let's roll. So one of the most common houseplants that people like to propagate are pothos. So I actually got this beautiful baby this morning, so we're not cutting her up. I actually went to Home Depot and I was looking for something completely different. I was actually looking for a pot for my office plant because my office plant, when I bought it, I realized this past week it's coming out the bottom, so we need to repot into a larger plant. But anyways, see this beautiful pothos? Yes. We are going to talk about propagating, and I thought that was a great specimen to show you guys what you would do. Obviously, I said I'm not cutting this because we just got it, but it's a good plant to show you guys on. So, first thing about propagation is understanding where you can propagate on your plant. So, like I said, you're going to want to propagate a mature plant. You do not want to propagate on an immature plant. And the reason I say mature is because, number one, when you cut a piece of the plant, it's going to take some time to essentially heal itself. So you don't want an immature plant because then it's going to be much harder on the plant to heal itself. Now these pothos, they're like superhuman. So they heal very quickly. But when you're talking about your more fragile plants, some anthurium, expensive plants like Monstera albo, Monstera Thai Constellation, you want to make sure that you're propagating off of a mature plant. You don't want the mother plant to then suffer and to start not doing so hot after you cut it, because you're going to be sad and it's going to be very upsetting. So what you have here, and now again, we're not going into depth about everything, so I'm just going to show you on certain plants. So this is your vine, and the way the pothos vine is there's one vine and then a leaf sprouts up every inch and a half on this vine. To propagate most plants, there are exceptions to the rule, you're going to want to cut at the node. So the node is where the leaf meets the vine or the stem of the plant. That is where you're going to get your roots. Now, speaking of roots, see these little things hanging off the edges here? Those are aerial roots. So your plant, when it's a vining plant, even if it's a plant that travels on the ground and vines on the ground, you're going to have these aerial roots. These aerial roots are how your plant affixes itself to its environment. So remember, we did the video on moss poles, and I said that different plants, they will grow a little differently on certain things. So this is one of them. Now, if this was on a moss pole, you could train this plant to go up, and it attaches itself with the aerial roots. Aerial roots are important, but not the end-all be-all. If your plant has aerial roots, a lot of times what you'll have is your plant will then sprout roots from this aerial root. Now, do you have to have an aerial root? Absolutely not. If your plant does not have an aerial root, it's okay. It will still sprout roots. It will just come from where this aerial root is coming from. And instead of being this aerial root, they'll just be regular old roots. And that's, again, okay. So you see I have the vine here. So in theory, you want to keep a couple of leaves on your vine. So you see how this one here, even though this is a new plant, that would have been a new leaf, and it's probably going to be, but it doesn't look in such hot shape. I would not cut up here. because this is still immature. I would actually probably cut down here somewhere, right in here. And that gives you a couple of leaves to work on. It also means that your vine is going to be a little bit longer when it gets there. And the most important part is that if you are propagating this and you get root rot, which sometimes happens, you can still cut away. So you still have some nodes to work with. I prefer when I'm propagating my own plants to give myself 5 or 6 nodes in a cutting. Now, obviously I've done with less. I've done with 1 node, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which would be down here. I would, and normally what I do is I take off the bottom like 1 or 2 leaves, just snip them off, drop it in some water and go on about my day. So that's how I would propagate for that one. Now we're talking about water. So obviously now we've snipped it, we've got a piece, and we're going to propagate that piece. So yes, there are certain ways you can go. Now, I usually have like a little jar like this, sometimes a little cup. You see, I need to clean this one out. And I fill it with water. And I like to let my water for my plants sit out for at least 24 hours. So I usually always have like a pre-filled can of water, bottle of water, whatever, watering can around here. So I would drop it in, just fill this with water, room temperature water, and then drop that bottom node in there. And that's why I say I cut off the leaves, because I don't want the leaves sitting in the water. I just want the stem. Now, when you propagate, some people will just drop them directly in the water. Some people allow them to callus. And the reason why is that root rot we talked about. Certain plants I like to callus over. My pothos, they love them some water, so I just drop those bad boys like straight after I cut them right in there. Now, speaking of cutting, please only cut your plants with clean scissors or shears. You do not want to introduce bacteria into your existing plant. So I always clean my shears after every cut. Like even if I'm cutting on the same plant, after every cut, I clean them with bleach, water, and Dawn. So I have like a little spray bottle with bleach water, and then I have Dawn, and I just clean them off really quickly to make sure that we're not introducing any new bacteria into our plants. I know, sounds crazy, but promise me the last thing you want to do is introduce a bacteria and it takes out the entire plant. Then you're going to be mad. And I don't want you mad. So yes, you can just drop it straight in a glass of water. Now, trick. So remember I talked about liquid dirt? Well, I love my liquid dirt. And when you make liquid dirt, you take a capful of your liquid dirt after you dilute it with a cup of water inside of here. And then you drop that capful into a gallon of water. So normally, to give my plants a little bit of a boost, because obviously you're cutting it and you're going to stress it, I will take a little bit of that liquid dirt that I made up, liquid dirt that I made up, and I will add some to my water. Now, you need to change out your water because you do not want your plant to be sitting in stagnant water for too long. So normally I try to change out the water at least once a week, just to keep the water fresh, to make sure nothing is growing in there, algae, any nasty bacteria. That way my cutting doesn't take a hit from anything hanging around in water, because everyone knows when you have sitting water, things will develop. So that's the water method. Now there's 2 other methods that a lot of people use. Well, there's 4. So the other one, remember we talked about this? Sphagnum moss. So I actually have a little propagation box that I put in my humidity cabinet. And in my propagation box is sphagnum moss. So let's get this thing open. I'm actually going to, as you guys can see, I've got a brandy, a silky pecana, and my Monstera Albo in there right now. So what happens is I actually have a little bit of Paralyte in here too. But you wet the sphagnum moss, you wring it out very well. That is important. You do not want your plant to sit in straight up water in this moss, because this moss will hold on to everything and you will get root rot. So this moss, though damp, is not been, no new water has been put on here weeks. And the top of this, as you see, so I close it up. You want something that's clear. You want the sunlight to come through. I just put holes in there for some air. And occasionally I just go open it and give it some fresh air. And when I say occasionally, I mean like once a week. Do not go touch it every day. One of the worst things you can do for your propagations is touch them all the time and bother them. Excuse me. So, yeah, don't touch them all day. So, I'm going to touch these just to show you, but I haven't bothered these in quite a while here. So, my brandy, my phyllo brandy, has been in here for 2 or 3 weeks. Did you see that little baby root there? Now, I could have propagated this in water. It may have sped it up, but I didn't feel like it. So I just dropped it in because I already had other things in here. But yes, so the idea is that you put the moss in here. You lay the plants on top of the moss. You do not need to put them down in the moss. I personally do not, because I don't want root rot. So I will just lay them on top. They do fine on top. I know some people like to put them in the moss. Me personally, I don't. Their plant is going to grow roots in search of water. So what you have on here, what's sitting here, will eventually start to grow roots and go down into the moss in search of water. So look at it like once a week. When I say look at it, I mean like open it up, make sure it's not dying. But for the most part, you're just going to leave it alone. It'll do its own thing. It'll grow roots. I've propagated quite a few things in here. Milano. We've propagated silver stripe. And actually, I broke the silver stripe in half on accident. It had 2 nodes. I broke it in half, dropped both sections here, and they both rooted. So, yeah. Wring it out. Put it in a container. Make sure the container has holes for air. Drop it on top of the moss. Put it somewhere with a lot of light. So I have mine under a grow light in my humidity cabinet. So I know these guys, usually when they're in the humidity cabinet, they're around like 90% humidity in here. Because the humidity cabinet is already at like 80%. So they're 90 and above in here. But yeah, leave it alone. If you don't have a humidity cabinet, you don't have grow lights, sit it in a bright window. Keep an eye on it. You don't want it to become sunburned, but definitely sit it in a bright window. If the moss seems like it's drying out, which you really shouldn't see that often, even if you wring it out properly, the moss just holds on to water, and this humidity will keep it moist. But if you see it, just spritz it with water. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to take it out and do anything with it. Just take a spray bottle, spritz it with some water, close that thing back up. The best thing you can do, again, is leave them alone. Your plants, the more that you mess with them, the more stress the plant is going to take on. So if you just leave it alone, it'll do its thing. I know sometimes it takes a while, some a month, 2 months, but have patience. They're going to do their thing. If they're looking fine, they don't have root rot or anything, leave them. They're going to do their thing. So the next method is Paralyte. Now that propagation box had a mix of Paralyte and sphagnum moss, which is okay. You can do just straight up sphagnum moss if you want to. That one just does very well with Paralyte in it. So Paralyte, you can grab that at Home Depot, just same places as you would get at Home Depot, Lowe's, Amazon, wherever. The idea with the Paralyte is you take your cutting. Now, sphagnum moss and Paralyte, make sure they callus. Do not just drop them in. You want them to callus because you don't want them to get root rot. They seem to get a little easier in Paralyte and sphagnum moss than they do in water. Weird? Yes. The thing is, your water has more oxygen in it than your sphagnum moss and your Paralyte. Yeah, so make sure you let those callus if you're going to drop them in here. I have not had a ton of success with Paralyte, but I also don't really go straight to Paralyte. I like the moss. So the idea is that you're going to drop your cutting up in here. So your cutting is going to be in the top part. You're going to put water in this, and you want water to go to like here. The water will, the Paralyte will wick the water up to the plants. Paralyte is well draining, drains very well. So does the sphagnum moss for the most part. If you have sphagnum moss on an actual plant, not in a humidity, it does actually drain very well. That will keep your plant from sitting directly in the water, but it will also give your plant a medium to grow through. You can always take this method, and if you have like just a node in here, like no flowers on top, even if you have flowers on top, you can take like Reynolds wrap, not the foil, but the cling wrap, drape it over the top to give it more humidity. Me, like I said, my humidity cabinet is already standard like 85, 90. So I always drop my propagations in there on top of a heat mat. Wow. I am all over the place today. And I check on them every once in a while to make sure that they don't have root rot. But otherwise, I just leave them be. Let them do their thing. Now, again, the fourth method that you want, some people do it. I'm not a fan of this because I want to make sure that I'm not getting root rot, and it's much easier to check that your plant is not getting root rot than the other three methods, is to just take a cutting of it and stick it in the dirt, preferably dry dirt. You want to give it some dry dirt at first, and then maybe mist the soil after that. You don't want it to be too wet because of the chance that it can get root rot. But I've never had much luck with that one. Certain things, yeah, you can just propagate them and they do fine in dirt. But me, I'm paranoid, and a couple of times I did just stick things in the dirt, didn't really work out. So I don't necessarily go that route, but that's not to say that that route won't work for you. A million methods to the madness, and it's all on personal preference. So yeah, those are like the general ways that you would do it. Now again, you're going to take a cutting for the node. Like I said, every plant is different, and there are some exceptions to that rule. There are some plants that you do not need to have it at a node for it to then grow roots, but we're not going to touch on that because that's just too complicated. So yeah, the general consensus. So while we're here, I'm actually going to show you a note on something else because I know people propagate Monstera a lot. So I wanted to touch on where that would be for you guys as well. So you'll grab my baby. All right. So that's the node. Where that leaf meets the stem, that's the node. That's the aerial root. See that aerial root? Yeah. See this one here? I don't know if you guys can see. Let me turn it this way. Here, there's a node right here where that leaf meets the stem. That's where you want to propagate. So if you have Monstera, where that leaf meets the skin, and usually you can tell the node because it's like a little, can you guys see this? Let me see if I can see this. You see here, it's like a little bump there where it meets. That's where you would take that and drop it either in water, moss, wherever, to do its thing. All right, so if you guys have any additional questions about propagation, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook, comment here on the video. I'm always open to helping other people out, so I want to see you guys flourish. Got any questions? Let me know. In the meantime, go ahead and like, share, subscribe to my channel. Peace, guys.